Okay. Hi, my name is Josh Fischer. I'm the product marketing manager for X-Rite here in the U.S. We are here today with Tom Ashe. Tom Ashe is a Colorati as well as an educator, and he actually just released a book that we'll talk about a little bit. And mainly we're going to talk about how to grow beards and wear glasses because we apparently both do that very, very well. No, but we're going to be talking about color management, and Tom is going to kind of take us through his workflow and teach us a little bit. Let's see, you can see my hands. I'm here, and Tom Ashe is here when we talk about product knowledge for color management. So, so he is going to educate you and also me as well. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So, how long have you been, let's do the education side, how long have you been teaching in the photo field?
I've been teaching, let me think, since 1999, so 14 years, I guess.
Wow.
Like that. Yep. When I went to Australia to do my, to go to grad school, I started, basically they wanted a cheap teacher, so that's what I got to do.
Yep.
So I could get my master's for free. So
that's cool.
It was good. Yeah.
So next year you get is it a watch or a?
Well, no, not from the world of teaching because, but I did. It's been 10 years since I've been teaching at SVA. So I did get a nice pen or a pen set from Tiffany's. So.
See that? That's very good.
That's
so
very nice.
If you study hard and buckle down, you can get a pen set from Tiffany's.
There you go.
For 10 years of education in color management and photography.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
And how long have you been, I mean, how long have you loved photography? Has that been since you were a child or?
Oh yeah, no, I've been in photography. I'd say I started taking pictures when I was in 6th or 7th grade.
Whoa.
And was the yearbook photographer for my Catholic grade school that I went to, so up till 8th grade, and then in high school I started to actually take photo classes and all that, and then went to RIT for when I would finally go into school. Not even thinking necessarily that I would do photography but I needed the school to have a good photo program.
Right. Well, a very good photo program.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and RIT accepted me on my birthday, or at least I got the letter on my birthday. So it was taken as a sign that I had to go there. So
yeah.
Yep.
So I want to start a fight right away.
Oh, good.
What was your first camera?
It was a Nikon F.
Oh, there you go.
We found a guy that. No, that's not true. My first camera was a Kodak 110 camera. I took pictures with that for a long time before I got my first SLR. So.
Like a little tiny brownie?
No, a little flat camera.
The flat,
like this. They took a little cartridge of film that went in.
Spy camera.
Yeah.
I always called it the spy camera.
Yeah, right, yeah. That wasn't that subtle, but yeah. Attempting to be a spy camera.
That's funny because I've always considered the FM1 my first camera. Mm-hmm. But now that I think about it, I totally had a 110 cartridge camera before that.
Yeah.
I have been lying.
You've been lying all along.
For years.
Josh. Jeez.
Yeah. So anyone who I've ever lied to, I'm a liar. But after that, going into color management, was it just that it was something you understood and you had a passion for, and where did that come into play?
The whole color management thing really started from at RIT. I was in their imaging and photographic technology program, so I call the geekier side of photography at RIT, which is sort of saying something.
Yeah, that is saying a lot.
Right. So while I was there, I had a great color theory teacher, a guy named Glenn Miller, and he was, really tough, really, but good, and I loved that side of color and how color works and all that kind of stuff. So that was fun. Who's there?
Jan was just waving at me.
Hey, Jan.
You're the worst. You're the worst. Jan's waving at you too. I'm not going to tilt the camera.
Hi, Jan. Please. Yeah. Yeah, it was Glenn Miller, and then I was there as sort of digital was starting at RIT too. So I'd have to give a shout out to Doug Ray, who started the digital stuff at RIT, and I took his sort of first classes, and I was also doing this whole thing where I was also trying to be the guy who that I could get my hands on before there was Photoshop. The big thing you could possibly use was a thing called a Cytex machine.
Oh yeah,
to be able to make any kind of manipulation of images, and you had to take 3 classes in the printing department to be able to do that. And I took all those classes, which included color and all this stuff. And I pictured I'd be this guy that worked between photography and the people who made the prints, the printers, and because just as this sort of guy. But of course, as soon as I finished those classes, then the digital stuff in Photoshop came out, and so it was all a moot point. So I touched the Cytex twice, and that was and then it went away.
Yeah. So from there, a million things different happened, and then
I went to work at Kodak, learned all their color management stuff, and so just to try to make their images look good, and that got me really interested. And then, as the story goes, there was this big exhibition of digital prints at the George Eastman House that came from all from the same place. They were from Nash Editions. It was which is the first fine art digital printmaking studio, started by Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and his business partner Mac Holber. And so they had this great exhibition and a big panel discussion, where the panel discussion was all these artists and printmakers from around the country saying what was good and what was bad about digital printmaking at the time. And what kept coming up, okay, I'll date this. This was 1998. Right. It was May 1998. And what kept it coming up was that the frustration, because what the artists saw on their monitor was not what was coming back from the printer.
Right. And if only there was something.
Only if there was some way. And I'm like, that's what I'm working on at Kodak. So I was like, I was excited by that, and that was like when the whole going to the opportunity to go to Australia to get my master's came up. So when I was there, I did my master's on this whole thing, digital print for fine art digital printmaking, using color management and collaboration to make it better. And so that's did more color management stuff. Came back to the States, moved home to Boston for a little while, worked for Monaco Systems at the time.
I've heard of them. I've heard of Monaco.
Later bought by X-Rite, and got to play with their toys and really get to know them. But I wanted to be back. I wanted to be teaching, and so that's what I ended up back in New York, and moved to New York 10 years ago. Started with SVA, and been doing consulting and running around talking about this stuff ever since.
Yeah.
Been wanting to write a book for a very long time, and finally just finished the book, which I'm very excited about.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And so that's coming out in February of 2014. So, yeah.
That's real soon.
Yes, it's very soon.
So now, I know you teach you teach multiple classes, right?
Yes.
So what?
The classes. I teach in two things. There's here at SVA, there are 4 photography programs, and I teach. There's the BFA photography program, and that's what I've been teaching in for 10 years. 7 years ago, Katrine Eisman started the Masters of Digital Photography program.
Right.
And I'm associate chair of that department. Katrine's the chair of the department. And so, in both of those departments, I teach a similar classes in digital printing and color management.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you start with the students, when I always started talking about color management, I would always push kind of the monitor calibration side the heaviest, because my big tag was you cannot edit an image accurately until you see it accurately. We make sure you see it accurately. Do you start with the capture? Do you start with that? And
No, I agree with you. As far as I first talk about color and how color works in general, and then for a full 15-week class, But then I definitely, if I go through what color management is, but right after that, the first device is the monitor.
Yeah.
And talking about the display calibration and profiling.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's always been kind of, I think everyone in color management has always agreed you really need to well, that's a necessity. If you're ever going to, what you see is what you get. You have to do that. And you actually, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, just because, the monitor, the display is so important to, we don't have anything else that we're trying to match really to.
Right.
We don't necessarily remember the scene. There's some cases where the scene is what we're trying to match to, but that's not usually the case in photography. So it definitely is that window into our digital darkroom and having that work. And if we're going to make any kind of adjustments to our image, we have to be able to have some faith and understanding that we know what the colors are that are in there, and that they're going to be able to come out the same.
Right. And you have a little something that kind of talks about the color side of it, or where you start. I think you're saying you have a presentation that has kind of beginnings.
I do. I don't have that for today, but I do have that kind of presentation. Yeah, and then what I normally just get into. I have a little bit of that. Yeah. So I'm going to switch into that for a second.
Yep. All right.
So
I'm going to take a drink. It's juice-based.
It's juice-based. I'm going to switch to me, and I'm going to share my screen and hop into here. All right. Is that coming through?
There you go. Yep.
All right. So, I start, of course, a lot of times just talking about the main issue that people, if they're taking color management at any level, the issue is that monitor to print match. So if it doesn't match, you're wasting a lot of time and money, all that. And really, this is where it isn't the first thing I'd get into in a bigger class, but the reason it doesn't match is really because the monitor and print reproduce color in very different ways, right? That's the monitor is using the additive mixing of light, red, green, and blue light, to produce all the colors that the monitor can display. So we start off with black, or in code value terms 0, 255 red, 255 green, 255 blue. Where they all overlap, we get white. All right, so that's the monitor versus the print that's using the subtractive mixing of dyes, inks, or pigments to produce those colors. So got the paper, 0%, 100% cyan, 100% magenta, 100% yellow. Where they overlap, we get black. All right, to reproduce those. Of course, as you know, Josh, there's another ink in most inkjet printers and printing presses, right?
Of course.
What is it? No, it's black ink.
Black,
right?
yeah.
Black, yeah.
It is
so
the
CMYK, right?
The most important, the most expensive, most replaced.
That's right. Exactly. Oh, on our printers, inkjet printers, for sure. You're right. Yeah. That's and do you know why there's black ink in the printer?
Why is there black ink?
Why is there black ink on a printing press?
I've always understood that it was the cost, because to mix all of those inks to make black, you're going to be using it, as opposed to having its own ink cartridge where it would be, you don't have to mix anything, it's already there.
Right. No, and that's absolutely true. That's that there's a side benefit to it. But the first thing is for us that where we're talking about monitor print match, for us the big thing is that in those printers and in printing press and inkjet printers, mixing full strength cyan, magenta, and yellow doesn't produce a true black. It produces a muddy brown or muddy green. Besides the big benefit you talked about, that you save some money too, is that for printing for text, it's much better to do that with one ink as opposed to black, as opposed to doing it with trying to overlap the threes, because the registration's so tough.
Right.
All right. So all of that, the additive versus subtractive, really what that runs us into is the big problem here for digital printmaking. So, of course, this is just the CIE chromaticity diagram showing the gamut or range of colors that devices can produce. And so the pink triangle, range of colors for a monitor, an older, most probably style as CRT monitor, but really pretty similar. And then the green shape here is a print on a coated paper as opposed to the blue on an uncoated paper. All right, the smallest gamut there, or range of colors. All right, and so what this is showing, the basic problem is, if we're talking about monitor to print match, is that there are colors the monitor can produce that the printer and paper cannot reproduce, even on the coated paper can't reproduce. And there are colors that the printer and paper can produce that the monitor can't display. So it's sort of happening in both directions, right? The whole for the possibility of them matching each other just isn't completely there, because they just reproduce completely different colors. And none of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, and I do in my classes, is going to go beyond what the physical limitations are of the printer and paper.
Right.
And I mean, color photography's never worked. It's never been able to reproduce all the colors of the world. It's always been a smaller range and rendering that there to represent the world. So stuff gets better and better. Printers get a little bit better gamut. Monitors keep getting a little bit better gamut. But it's sort of, I mean, they're different though, no matter what.
Right. So, just because we like to make things harder for people.
No, I don't think it's just what the physical limitations are. So.
Or that. I've heard it both ways, but yeah.
We're just trying to make it more difficult. Wait, some people are just, it's job security for some people. Yeah.
For me, it definitely is for me. No, we're just kidding.
Yeah. So, I mean, then I just always go into just color management. I mean, the two big things, of course, are accuracy and consistency. That's what you're trying to get through all the devices, and of course, the monitor being that first one, then your input devices to the printer. And what I always try to stress, and I know I might get some resistance on this one, is that I really try to stress thinking of color managing a device in two stages, and that they are two distinctly different things: calibration and profiling, or calibration and characterization.
Right.
Don't know where. And so calibration just means, and it says their optimal repeatable state that you're bringing the device to, that it's just put the device, whether it's a monitor or printer, in its best condition first, and then maintain that condition. Keep it that way. So on the monitor, the examples, the luminance, how bright the display is, and trying to maintain it, that once you've set it up and calibrated it to that, or whether it's 80 candelas per meter squared or 120, that you keep it there after you've done it. So on the printer, make sure once you've set it up for the optimal media type that you use it, if you're printing the profiling patches, but also when you're printing your images. Yeah. So once you've done it, once you've set the device in the best condition, then you characterize or profile it. Find out what the limits are, what the gamut is of the monitor or the printer and paper combination. The ICC profile is just that information that knows everything about your device, that hopefully comes from measuring it in a custom way, so it's your actual device.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, then of course you go into, like you said, and the first thing we talk about is the monitor and calibrating and profiling the device itself. We could be using a colorimeter or spectrophotometer, like that one, Pro 2, spectrophotometer, or the Color Monkey, or the i1 Display Pro colorimeter. Question sometimes comes up: what's the major difference? What do you describe as the major difference between colorimeter and spectrophotometer?
That they're made to read different. They're for different applications. Whereas a spectrophotometer can read textures, and a colorimeter, it is not that refined, where it doesn't need to do that.
Right. Yeah. The colorimeter is, I mean, it's for the emissive light of the display only, whereas these two spectrophotometers can do that emissive light of the display and the reflective prints as well. Yeah. So and that makes it a little bit more. So the only thing I add to that, I mean, is just a little bit of that the colorimeter sort of acts like our eye a little bit more, that it has about our eyes have 3 sensors, 3 cones,
Mm-hmm.
and most colorimeters are around 3, maybe up to 7 scent detectors in them. Where the spectrophotometer, I mean, in general, is giving you even more information than this, but at least gets you every 10 nanometers through the visible spectrum, 400 to 700 nanometers, like 30 measurements of what it's looking at the same time. So it's a little bit more of a robust measurement device.
I like that, comparing it to the human eye. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. Because the colorimeter really does do a great job for the display and the projector too. It can do a great job. And we talk about setting it up. I mean, the big thing, of course, for luminance is that our LCD displays can be so bright and beautiful, but it's just too bright for being able to match them up to a print output. Right. So we really have to limit the luminance, bring it down from maybe 400 candelas per meter squared down to something more reasonable for us, somewhere 80, 120 candelas. What do you have a recommendation in there for luminance?
So if I'm printing, which obviously I do a lot of printing, if you can see behind me.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. I go a little bit lower, so I would go around 80. And if you're not printing, I go just a little bit higher, between 90 and 100, but I don't go over that, because I want to make sure that I'm having a realistic expectation of that output.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I just had students doing a lot of prints with the different labs mainly around New York, but somehow they ended up, so a lot of them coming back and saying that they should be at 120 candelas per meter squared was what they were recommending. Sort of the higher end of it, which sort of surprised me that they were all sort of saying, I mean, too much of a majority. I'm sort of worried that my students are somehow feeding them the answer somehow, and thinking that's what they want them to hear. That's what I want to hear or something.
No.
But yeah, no, it would be a little bit lower. I agree. Yeah, for print output.
Yeah, and that's the funny part of it is when you get a monitor, brand new monitor, it is, the last one I had hit 350 looms, and you can watch an action movie outside in full sunlight at that brightness. Yeah, and you're just going to have a horrible expectation of that output afterwards, because it's going to be just way too dark afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great for a lot, and it's quite beautiful, but it's not for match and print too.
Right.
So, gamma, just the contrast of the display in some ways. 2.2 is just the general that we go to. White point, color temperature. If you're one thing I would say. For a laptop, I would pretty much go native for laptops and projectors for the most part. Would you agree with that?
Completely.
Yeah. But for displays, for higher-end displays, where you can do it, you're typically going to put it somewhere between 5,000 Kelvin, 6,500, and I'll put this one up just to have what we're talking about, color temperatures. Of course, we usually talk about with light sources. The lower the color temperature, the warmer the appearance. Candlelight at 2,000, tungsten at 3,200, 3,400 Kelvin. Photographic daylight and strobes around 5,500 Kelvin. Overcast sky, 6,500 Kelvin. Clear blue sky, 10,000, 12,000. And so we just want to bring our display somewhere towards the middle of this, and a little bit more of the neutral part. And what I tell people is it really has more to do with the I'll go back to that. The type of application they're doing and the type of work they're doing. So a good general choice, of course, is 6,500 Kelvin for a lot of different things, including that. Of course, definitely if they're doing video work at the same time as they're doing print work, 6,500 makes or work mainly for the web. 6,500 makes a lot of sense. For print output, for the stuff I'm sort of doing, I do like a little bit. I prefer around 5,500 Kelvin. So I don't know where you are.
That I would always say 5,500 for the print.
Right.
That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad to have that. Confirmation on it, so that's good. So what's next? I mean, we go talk about the input side. and digital camera profiling. Of course, using Macbeth Color Checker as the device, or the 24 patch, like in the Passport, or the Color Checker SG. And I mean, really, and what I sort of stress a little bit of is that for a digital camera profile, that it's a profile for that camera. I do say, but and for that light source that you're photographing under. I think a lot of people, not everybody agrees with that, but that's I think that in the end, the profile is definitely about that. And I really only think it's for limited purposes. It's really for applications where your goal is to match the colors of the original scene, right, as closely as possible. Fine art reproduction, catalog photography, product photography, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's always, and I also always recommend it for food photography as well. Because if you're off just a little bit, the human eye instantly knows if it's off just a little bit. Eggs just don't look right.
Right.
Meat does not look right. And your brain can perceive that, but you don't know what's wrong. You just know something is wrong.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about food photography that way. Yeah, that's a good point. Because definitely, for me, in some ways, when I think about food photography, because we want so much just a pleasing rendering from food photography, we want it to look good and taste good. Whether it matches the exact egg or the exact thing is not necessarily quite as important, but definitely, I think you're right. I mean, we would be sensitive to memory colors being wrong at the same time and being off. So those green eggs would be.
Depending on the publisher, if you're going for more of a children's book.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that might be it, but.
And then of course there's the DNG profiles, which are great, so that you can do with the Color Checker Passport software. I mean, the main thing I see for benefit for that is getting a more consistent rendering from more than one camera, and being able to bring that, like multiple maybe different types of cameras, or cameras from the same type of camera but different actual body, that can. Bodies, like for wedding photographers, things like that can be useful.
And we always promote that if you're a wedding shooter, and most wedding shooters are shooting a two-body setup where you can have different lenses on there. You're going to want to capture it instead of going back and forth and trying to get your images to match each other. You now have a standard to start from. Right,
exactly. They can push each of those bodies to that standard. Yeah. So I agree. Of course, then printer profiling. And being able to build custom printer profiles. And of course, that's for every printer-paper combination, mainly, that people have, because there's definitely always confusion about that. Just for that printer, do I need a profile, or it's really for that the printer and paper combination.
Right.
And because every one of them is going to have a different gamut, different range of colors, so we're able to find out if once the printer is calibrated, we're able to find out what the gamut is, what the range of colors. We send a series of patches in RGB or CMYK, depending on the way the printer's set up, and if you're using the driver or RIP, and we measure, get the print, and you can measure what colors result on each one of those patches. So definitely being able to do that with a spectrophotometer is fantastic, and whether it's a Color Monkey or the i1 Pro 2. And of course, for my students, we just got, on the BFA side, they just got an ISIS tape. I know. They're pretty excited after having to do like at the top picture of measuring each row by hand. But of course, what I tell them is, back in the day, I was measuring one patch at a time, so they don't know. You don't even know my page.
Do you do that when I was your age? Do you start it with that?
No, I don't quite say like that, because I was actually most probably older than them. So I know it's even sadder.
Yeah. No, I've been there.
Yeah. So of course, using i1 Profiler has been great to be able to do a lot of that. So for be able to profile all the devices.
Yeah.
So the thing I usually get into after that is really how do you then use the profiles.
Oh, good.
And the profiles that we build.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing I first get into is like that difference between assigning and converting profiles in Photoshop and Lightroom. And so, I mean, the main thing there is that when you assign a profile, you're not changing it at all. All you're doing is telling Photoshop what the RGB numbers mean. So if you so sort of example showing this image that you can see the RGB numbers from the left to the right stay exactly the same. The histogram stays exactly the same, but the image is changing because we're telling Photoshop when we assign the profile how to interpret those RGB numbers. And the way it's happening under the hood is you can see it's those LAB numbers are what are changing at the same time. Right? So to be able to get that, hopefully, and when you're doing it, you're assigning it, and it's hopefully more like, in this case, it was supposed to be like a scan, the original that you put on the scanner, but hopefully you're assigning a profile when Photoshop doesn't know how to interpret the values. And one of the scenario that I tell people is that they might get in is they get a file from a client or from somebody else. They open it up, and Photoshop says, this is untagged. There's no profile inside this, so I don't know how to show you the colors correctly. Right. So, of course, what you do at that point is you call the person that sent you the file and find out what color space they're working in, and then assign that space to the image. Yeah.
Right.
So.
No, that's great. That's something that we don't really talk about enough. I don't think a lot. We always start with the, going into Photoshop. You skip that first part. Or at least we do a lot. So I think that's really good to kind of get a little. That's a very easy definition of why it's there.
Yeah, it's just that just to help interpret the values and get you to a good place first. And then conversions are different in that here you're going from one color space into another. And you're doing it to get a match, right, from one thing to the other. Let's see. I mean, here I could go into it. Don't have to. I usually talk about, because here I'm converting into a working color space like Adobe RGB or sRGB or ProPhoto RGB. That I try to explain. Well, what are these working color spaces? Right. Anyway, so and that whole thing just, of course, what they sort of all have in common. Adobe RGB, sRGB, I got Bruce RGB up there for Bruce Fraser, is that they're all independent and neutral. They're independent of any devices, monitors, scanners, digital cameras, and printers. Right. And by neutral, I just mean that when you're in those spaces and you have equal red, green, and blue, that if you're looking at the info palette and you're looking at something in your photograph, if you have equal red, green, blue, that means it's a neutral. Right. That's not true if you're in monitor, scanner, or printer space. So that's what's special about these standard independent neutral color spaces. And then what's different, there's a few things that's different, but one of them is the gamut associated with them. So for color match RGB and sRGB, they're the smallest ones. They're the size of a monitor, smaller size spaces. And then you've got in the yellow, slightly larger, is Adobe RGB 1998, which is the reason for that one is to get those, just to be able to just get those colors that the printer could produce that the monitor or these older displays couldn't display for us. Right. All right. So if you're printing, it's a good space, good general space to be using, and then of course we'll jump to the behemoth like ProPhoto RGB. Right. And which is really about helping to preserve the full gamut of everything from your source, whatever that's film or if it's digital capture, and keep it that way. And that's why ProPhoto, the gamut of ProPhoto, is what's used under the hood in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw for their processing, just so they don't lose any of that. I mean, my big recommendation on using ProPhoto is that you just definitely have to be using a high bit depth. You have to be at 16-bit per channel when doing it, because if you're not, that's stretching over 8-bit values over a really big area.
Right.
But a big part of it that's not going to be used, and you could run into posterization because of it. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's what a lot of people get obsessed with the size of Profoto, and you want to break it to them that there are no printers.
Exactly. Nothing even close to
that
be able
can
to produce
come close to creating that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, but I definitely, as long as you're at a high bit depth, and I definitely understand the idea of wanting to preserve as much of it as possible, and as an archiving space and everything like that. But yeah, for everybody. No, it's not for everybody.
Right. And that's what kind of, I don't know if you agree with this, but one of the things we talk about is the funnel effect, that you want to go from the largest color space possible to the smallest color space you have to. Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to ever do this conversion. You can't, no matter what, you can convert, for, let's say, from sRGB to Profoto.
Right.
But you're not going to get more gamut by doing it, because you can never. It can't extrapolate out and know, oh, that's the color you meant for me to do. It can only do what's in the file. So whatever the smallest gamut or the smallest bit depth you go with, you can change it, but you're never going to get that back.
Right. If you don't capture that information, we can't make it for you.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. If it's not there to be able to use. All right. So what else? In a conversion, so we get the working color space, get an engine. It does the math. It doesn't have a big impact on it right now. There's talk of it someday having more of an impact, but yeah. Has X-Rite ever come up with one? An engine?
No. We're, and I'm saying this jokingly and not jokingly. We are Switzerland, so
exactly. Why would you? Yeah. And so you do with us what you like. Yeah.
Right.
With
that's
our
yours.
Profiles. Yeah. Okay. And so then there's the rendering intent, and that's usually the other big thing that people wonder about, and what should they be setting when they print or doing a conversion like this. And of course, the two that we use as photographers are perceptual and relative colorimetric.
Yep.
And so, real quick, just to make sure everybody knows the difference between them. For me, at least, tell you what you think of it as far as an explanation of it. For me, it's there are two types of colors that you do when you do a conversion. There's out of gamut colors, and there are in gamut colors. Colors that you can reproduce on the destination that you're going to, and the colors you can't. And so here, like if we'll say we're going from this the pink triangle, the monitor, and we're going to this uncoated paper, the smallest gamut in there. And so you've got the colors on the left-hand side up here with the arrow going. That's an out-of-gamut color. So, of course, those out-of-gamut colors are going to have to come in. And with perceptual rendering, what it does differently is how it handles the in-gamut colors. With perceptual rendering, the in-gamut colors change as well.
Right.
So everything's sort of changing with perceptual rendering, all with the goal of maintaining the relationship of colors overall. And it's sort of how color photographs have worked in general. And then you've got, compare that with colorimetric, where the out-of-gamut colors come in, but the in-gamut colors we leave alone.
Right.
We keep those as accurate as they can be. So like I said, those are our two big ones. Relative colorimetric is just one, as opposed to absolute colorimetric. It's about the white point, right? Relative colorimetric, it says white is white. Whatever the white of the source is, will make the brightest white of the destination. In absolute, we say no. White has color to it, just like we were saying, the color temperatures of different light sources. And absolute will try to match the color of the white from the source. And so photographers, we don't tend to use it unless we're doing some proofing stuff for our clients. But relative is mainly what we use. And I don't know, for me, the types of images, if you want to think of it that way, is which one you'd use. Perceptual rendering is I use it for any color, anything where you have a lot of saturated colors within your image. For sure, you'd want to be with perceptual, because it will make sure you maintain details in the saturated colors.
Yeah.
All right, and then colorimetric if your colors are more muted, like a portrait for the most part should have fairly near neutrals and neutrals, I would be with relative colorimetric, but definitely a black and white image where everything's in gamut for sure because there's no color to it already.
Right.
That relative colorimetric's a better one for that as well.
Yeah, that's. So. I would definitely agree with that.
Cool. All right. Well, just come on. Challenge me a little bit on it. No.
Well, you're right. So.
Oh, yeah, I know. But I'm only coming up with these very obvious things. Nothing to challenge. All right. So then the other one's saturation. Out of gamut colors come in, but to the gamut boundary, in gamut colors also are more saturated, just keeping punchy color. So once again, not for photographers. So back to this whole idea of the conversion. Use black point compensation, really only about relative colorimetric and making sure we maintain shadow detail for that. Dither creates a little pattern that makes things a little bit smoother. But the idea is, once again, the conversion, we go from one color space to the other, and we want to get the match. We want the things to match. And so here, once again, left to right, we're getting that image to match from one side to the other, but we are changing the file to do it. We're adjusting the RGB numbers to get the match. And so you can see that the numbers that stay the same this time are the LAB numbers. So that to get that match, we have to adjust the RGB numbers. So we do a conversion whenever we want the colors to match. We do it when we want them, when we're printing. We do it when we want to convert to our website, for our images to go to our website, and we want to be an sRGB. We convert because we want them to look that way. When we're going to go to a lab and we get a profile from them or whatever it is, we convert when we want things to match. Yep. So back to the other way, assign, where we're just telling it what the colors should look like. All right. Let's see. One of the best things of course, in Photoshop that it can also do, so that's the assign versus convert. I've got this whole other analogy I could do for you that I do for my classes on money, but I'm gonna hold off on that. The other big thing that Photoshop does, of course, is soft proofing, and actually Lightroom does now too.
Yes,
lets us do soft proofing. Yeah,
and that was in 5, but not in 4, and it's also in the cloud version, right?
It is in the it's definitely in the cloud. Yep, and it's both 4 and 5.
Oh, is it 4?
I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it came in with 4, stayed with 5. So of course, what that is, it just helps you to create a simulation on your monitor. As long as you have a good calibrated monitor,
right? You
have a good printer profile, we could simulate how this is going to look. So in this example, I've got, if anybody can read that we're first, I'll turn that on and off. You can see pretty subtle difference, most probably, if you can see it at all, between when you're using the printer profile here, and then we can check. What I think is useful is be able to check the rendering intents. So here I'm switching between relative colorimetric and perceptual. So before you even make a print, you can try to make up your mind, for my image, which one do I like it better?
Right, and some people don't always, I don't know, I think they want like a finite answer, like you always use perceptual, you always use relative.
Right, and I had my reasons for doing one versus the other for the perceptual and relative colorimetric, and that one with the flower there that does have saturated colors with details. Definitely, you're going to get a little bit more details with the perceptual, and that shows up in in this soft proof as well. But I mean, you don't. It doesn't. There are no hard and fast complete rules. You want to look at the individual image to make up that final idea. All right, and then what do I usually do? Then I go to, of course, just so people can see it. That's perceptual. That button, preserve RGB numbers. So it makes the image look sort of crazy right here. Basically what that's showing is if I set these RGB numbers that are in my file to this printer or paper combination, but I never converted it, this is what it would look like. All right. So if you don't convert into a printer paper profile, this is sort of the look that you might get. of course, that mistake's harder to make than it used to be. So it's good. It's good. You don't have to worry about that as much. The other thing, I don't know about you, but the other thing I use preserve RGB numbers for is for troubleshooting any problems or checking out the quality of profiles, printer profiles. Like if I'm ever finding one that that some things are acting up, that here is a way to actually see it. It's sort of at its extremes and make it'll show any kind of really weird behavior, like in the gradation I've got here in this sort of little portion of a test page I'm showing on there. So.
I've never done that, but that does make perfect sense. I mean,
yeah, it's just as a way to push the profile a little bit and to be able to see what you might be getting. It just reveals some stuff that you wouldn't normally necessarily see, except for it'd be more subtle maybe on the print, for the problems you might get. So of course then you've got the gamut warning and this isn't interesting that. What it's doing is just putting a middle gray, in this case, on any colors that can't be reproduced on that printer paper combination.
Right.
That are in your file and can't be reproduced exactly. The question I usually get from people is then, well, does that mean I have to do something? The colors are out of gamut.
Right.
And really, what I really more of what all of this is about is setting expectations, right? You know, so that you just know that they aren't going to be, and that there might be some problems. Of course, this is going to be more important if it's you're a product shooter, and this is your customer's product. This is Coca-Cola Red or Tiffany Blue or whatever it is. You know, so that's going to be the place where it's going to be. Oh, well, maybe we have some issues we have to worry about or change the printer paper, that kind of thing. Right. So, yeah. Other than that, it's just going to soft-proof it and show you this is more like what it's going to produce.
Yeah, you're managing expectations.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yep. And so, here it is in 5? Yep, in Lightroom 5, the soft-proofing that you can do. And one of the nice things of being able to soft-proof, because in Lightroom is because you can even soft-proof just to a working color space like sRGB or ProPhoto, and that makes it so that the RGB numbers that they show in Lightroom are actual code values 0 to 255 instead of being percentages. So if you're like me and you're used to looking at the code values a little bit more and analyzing those than the percentages, it can be a little bit more useful. But of course, we can also have it just soft-proof to, in this case, a printer-paper combination, so we can see the rendering and set those expectations again.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what else? So, we can also use it to soft-proof and see before and after, and have that work really well. And like it's showing here, this is more about that having the RGB numbers. Right. And you can see here is forcing where I'd done a white balance to be able to get rid of the bluish cast that was there because I shot with smartly with under tungsten setting on my camera when I was shooting a daylight scene. So
yeah, I use that technique. Can we call that a technique?
I mean, the blue image is actually kind of fun.
It is.
It's a whole other planet and time of. Bizarre time of day. But,
that's always I love talking to photographers and hearing the story of the accidental best image ever.
Exactly.
I was driving down to Asbury Park, and it was pouring rain, and we were supposed to go to the Stone Pony, and we're like, no, forget it, because there was a giant crowd outside, and I stuck a wind film camera out the window, and I took a picture, and I got this just perfect shot, like perfect, best picture I've ever taken. It was with a wind-up film camera out of a moving car in the pouring rain, and I have never been able to get an image that's better than that.
Oh, well, well, for me, it's the images I have that I didn't take that are these amazing images that could have been. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, these things were, and it's of course frustrating if you're somebody who wants to have the technique to be able to get any of those images. There's some things that just chance has to be on your side a little bit to be able to. You have to be ready for it. And you have to have the stuff there to do it. But it's a combination, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it's cool that Lightroom's doing that now. And then, of course, then what we do very importantly is print with the use the printer profiles and to actually print the image. And here it's just going to do a conversion on the fly as you send the document to the printer, right? And you don't have to do that edit, convert to profile like I was showing before for the printer profile. You much better not to do it.
Right.
It actually won't work no matter what now.
Right.
If you're printing from Photoshop. But of course, the big thing is that if you've got the printer profile there, and that's one I built with that profiler for Ilford paper, is that you want to make sure that you go under print settings and make sure you get back to the same settings you use once they got that calibration thing.
Yes.
Get back to the same settings we would use when we printed the patches.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the major stuff of just making sure to be able to get it to work. You have to get back to the same settings. You have to be consistent to be able to make it work.
Right. And that's always, going through walkthroughs like this is always so important, and you can always go to X-Rite's YouTube or you go to xritephoto.com because there's so many steps. When you do it the first time, it's a little bit daunting, but after you have it under your belt, it's pretty easy.
Right. Yeah. But it still everybody can get tied up no matter what. But absolutely, you're right. Yeah. As long as you're thinking about that as the calibration, get it back to this state, this best state. I think it can be, and repetition for all this helps as well. So
right.
I'm going to get into that one. Here, that idea that you can't you can no longer do no color management from Photoshop. So when you're profiling printers, you want to use this Adobe Color Print utility. Or print right from the application, like I1 Profiler.
Right.
That's out there. But definitely, you can mess up a profile if you try to print the patches from Photoshop. So,
yeah.
And then my last slide. Oops, how did that happen? Sorry.
Very coy of you, Tom.
Oh yeah. So, and like I said, in February, all this and more will be revealed, but to the world. So.
I feel like we're on the Bravo network, and that was the last. Oh, did I mention?
Yeah. Did I mention it?
No, but in all seriousness, definitely take a look. Tom obviously is a master printer. He knows exactly what he's doing, and his years and years and years of experience can definitely benefit everybody else when it comes to color management and the quality of your output. So,
hey, thanks.
Of course.
All right. How do
That was a lot of.
A lot of slides. I hope that was.
No.
It
was a lot of information. It's funny. I've been teaching this for, not as an educator, but kind of on the manufacturer.
Of course you have. Yeah.
Well, on the manufacturer side for about 10 years, and there's a lot of things that you covered that just aren't talked about a lot. Little tips and tricks and ways of describing things that incredibly logical and I think really, really helpful.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I just sit here and say, that's
that's you did more than that. No, you really. It was good. You confirm. I've been actually thinking I wanted to confirm something with you and what you're saying too, and that I'm happy to be. Wrong. My students prove it all the time that I'm wrong. So, but there's plenty of that for all of us. So.
Yeah. All right. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So this was all in the celebration of the Festival of Color Calibration that X-Rite is holding throughout the month of November. You can actually go to calibratecolor.com and you can learn more about it. We have in-store events where you can go and have your laptop calibrated for free. They're all over the United States, so you can find your local one. Obviously, there are Google Hangouts that we're doing throughout the month. The next one, I believe, is on the 27th with Vincent Versace, and we're going to be talking about printing in black and white and how color management is still a very important part of that process. And we're also doing webinars throughout the month. A number of them have already passed, but they are, of course, archived. But there's still a number of them that are coming up that Joe Brady's hosting. So calibratecolor.com. If you have any questions, you can always find us on xritephoto.com. This is going to live on the YouTube page. Now I feel like I'm just listing websites. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on everything, Facebook. But really, Tom, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And of course, thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. So, thank you and have a good night.
Night.